The Beta 19 OEMs for MX bikes are finally here. The OEM Project team has finally completed them after 4 test runs, and they have a full official release now available, which you guys can check out in the description below. There's links to it. There's also a README link that you guys can go down there and figure out what's in this, what's the reasoning behind all of it, more about the change logs, and what you can perhaps do to go fast on these new OEMs as well, because there's actually quite a few different changes to these bikes, how they handle, how they feel, and what you can do to actually optimize your gameplay in MX bikes. So let's jump in and talk about this. We're going to start off by going over the changelog, and then I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about why this makes sense as a forward move for the game, even though in some ways it's backwards thinking with a lot of improvements they've made in the past to these OEM bikes. So to quickly get into the changelog, they have a new tire system which is based on dynamic traction on the wheel load. Wheel load refers to the force exerted on each wheel influenced by factors like body positioning, leaning, throttle control, braking, and terrain adaptation. This system gives you direct control over traction, allowing for precise maneuvers such as power sliding, squaring up, gripping the terrain, and handling challenging sections with confidence. Previously, erosion was inverted, with the deepest ruts forming before the tires had the most load. Now erosion matches with the highest load, so tires grip better in both pre-made and dynamic ruts. Try it out by adjusting the deformation slider. They have new OEM MX tires as well that you're going to be able to put in your folders, and expanded tire options as well through all the classes to cover a new tire lineup for each of the bikes. So for all the classes, the front tire is the same, the 80-121. That's been pretty much standard through a lot of their play tests. I think they took one of them away, but that's basically the one that they chose to run with. But it's kind of varied for the rear tires. The MX1 or 450 class has a 110-90 and a 120-80. The MX2 or 250 class has a 110-90 and a 110. The MX2 class or the 250 class has a 100-90 or a 110-90. And of course, most of you guys will be in this realm. MX3, 110-90, 120-80, and 120-90. And then our MX e-bike, which of course like Stark Varg and a couple other ones like that, 110-90, 100-90, 120-80, and 120-90. So the most tire range options for the e-bikes, but I think that they were trying to narrow down a pinpoint model for what you can expect out of the race machines, which most people, of course, use MX1 and MX2. So here's a quick rundown of kind of the main points of this changelog. They have steering improvements, enhanced steering response to match new tire system and recent updates in Beta 19, power delivery recalibration and optimization, fine-tuned power output across all bikes to feature better balance across the board, improved power to ground for MX2 class, making the MX2 class more viable and fun, temperature management, adjusted engine temperature handling for more consistent performance, shift helper refinements made gear shifts feel more realistic with a fairer difference between bikes equipped with quick shifters and those without. Engine damage temporarily disabled. While waiting for a fix on tire collision detection by Paboso, engine damage is turned off to prevent sudden failures during races. Higher usability for gears 4 and 5, improve the effectiveness of higher gears. Stronger rear brakes, increased braking power for better control. New 2025 liveries. They updated the Gas, Husqvarna, and Yamaha bikes with the latest PNT liveries, and the Suzuki shifter fix as well, corrected the shifter's rotation to the proper orientation. So that's kind of the main points of the changelog. They also had a couple audio enhancements, but in the link below, there's actually a whole section in it that kind of describes what is wheel load, how to influence it, kind of what you can do, like I said, to make this game play the way that you want it to play, because there's going to be so many setup changes that people are going to go through in the next month or two to dial these bikes in. And this is your way of maybe jumping ahead of that by learning what they were trying to accomplish in this OEM V0.19 update and working on your setups yourself. So the basic gist of this, and this is going to be the dumbest thing that I will say in this video, but it will make sense when I explain it, is that it is now easier to turn, but it's harder to turn well, if that makes sense. It's easier to actually come into a corner and apex a corner harder, turn down in the corners. You don't have to find this one magic angle that you lean in the corner and you basically just stay on one spot of the throttle all the way through, and you go in and out the exact same way, and you can triple, quad, whatever you want to do into a rhythm section. You have to use throttle control a lot better in this new update to manage where the traction is on the tire. The body positioning matters, leaning forward, getting the weight over the front of the bike so that the tire has room to dig in. And also, because of the sliding nature of the rear tire on the bikes now, it's easier to kind of like apex off of the top of a berm or off of a rut, out of a rut, for example, so that you don't feel like you have to basically, like I said, follow that one magic angle to get the most speed out of the corner. There's a couple different approaches that you can take to still go fast in and out of a corner, and that's kind of the main change. But it has actually slowed things down because, again, they're trying to make it so that you're not getting perfect 100% concrete traction at all times, which is one of the things a lot of people kind of complained about with this game is that it's unrealistic how fast you could go in corners, just especially flat corners, just leaned in and just on it all the way through, and pretty much no rear end brake whatsoever. Because in real life, if you're wide open sliding through a corner, especially past a lean angle, the rear tire is usually going to break traction. The front tire tends to break traction first, but the rear tire will eventually find its way around. So you can power slide now, which is a new dynamic that allows you to, obviously break traction with the rear tire, slide it through the corner, and maybe even find ways to cut under people. First thing that I thought about when I, even read this was Jet Lawrence's nice pass that he made on Tim Geiser at the Motocross of Nations when they were racing in race 3. So there's a couple ways that you can manipulate the bike to better corner, do things a little bit differently. Generally speaking, I think that your more my level players, the amateurs or the novices in the game, are going to find this update to be frustrating, because if you got used to kind of that grippy traction model coming out of corners, it's going to feel weird to have to modulate that a little bit better and be more on top of it so that you feel like you're carrying speed correctly, basically in every corner, but obviously is when it comes to Supercross. But the top players in the game, I feel like, have already found a better feel with this model, even from just one day of playing it. And a lot of the top creators, of course, had already put out videos basically the second that these bikes dropped, talking about them, playing them, so on and so forth. So here's a couple quotes from some of those top creators about what they had to say about these bikes and how it felt to them. So Linz, of course, Connor Linz is one of the bigger ones. He obviously is the basically fastest rider in the game right now. He's won a lot of championships. He just won the MX Bikes of Nations with Great Britain. And he actually, I thought this was interesting. He said, when you get up onto the middle of the tire, it really wants to go. The grip in the center of the tire is unreal. Now, it may be a case of trying to get in and out of a corner as quickly as possible, rather than just staying fully cranked over for as long as you can. And why I find that interesting is because, again, when it comes to the racing aspect of it, these guys have gotten kind of fine-tuned into dig out a rut. It's the perfect rut for the angle and speed that they want to go into a rhythm section, or, you name it. Even if it's an outdoor track, they'll find a way to dig the perfect rut out and go as fast through that rut as they possibly can. I think that this opens up the opportunity, at least, for a couple different lines and variations to be created, because guys will want to either cut out of a rut early, cut out of a berm early. And like Connor says here, if you turn out of a corner and stand the bike up faster, you're going to find that forward traction a lot better to your liking than staying on the lean angle of the tire as long as possible, which is what, the old meta used to kind of be. So I found that kind of interesting, because right from basically the best rider in the world or the game's mouth, it's kind of almost better to turn down in corners now, potentially. He didn't obviously go super deep in detail with the bikes yet, because they just got them today, but that was some of his initial thoughts. Now, what Troy Jan had to say about the slip and feel of the tires is this. To me, the biggest difference is the front end. It feels like it's really hard to tuck the front end now, and I think that has to do with two things. The first thing being that they reworked some type of physics in the front end. I'm not sure how or what it is, but also since the back end actually slides out now, the front end is not taking as much of the load. And Troy Jan in his video actually later went on to say that you're going to have to lean forward a lot more in your corners to be kind of on it. And I think that that helps with, making sure the rear tire is planted, because if you're way over the back of the bike, you're just going to be kind of flopping and fishtailing. You're not putting a lot of emphasis on weighting the rear tire. Whereas if you're leaning over the front of the bike, it gives the rear tire a lot more kind of ability to sit into something. And I watched his entire video, and I feel like as he slowly adapted to that change and starting to lean forward more, he was finding more comfort with actually leaning over the front of the bike and putting more weight on the front tire, which in turn also made it so that you maybe slip the front wheel a little bit more in situations that they hadn't in the past, when the old meta, like I said, was to kind of lean off the back of the bike, weight the outside peg. I think with this, you're going to see a lot more of like almost middle on the bike, lean forward. And that is a more realistic look to real life as well, because if you leaned off the back of the bike in real life, you would die, especially in a rut. So very interesting to hear his perspective as well. And of course, our guy Reaper Doc, he did a fantastic breakdown of the ins and outs of this patch notes with the OEM V0.19. But he actually said this, which I thought was interesting when he came to playing and testing the models to begin with. He says, "It feels like you are punished with a loss of time, but not punished with a crash. In a 180 bold turn, I can come in and try to pivot, and I can do that perfectly and not lose a lot of time with swinging the rear end around. But if I get too hard on the throttle, it's just going to spin the rear end around, and obviously you'll pretty much have a either big mistake or a crash." Whereas in the past, if you weren't in that perfect lean angle, and this is not what he's saying, but in the past, if you're not in that perfect lean angle, you're just, hoping that you can somehow get enough speed out of a corner and just get that last little extra lean angle out. The front tire will catch, you'll high side to do something stupid. So with this, you come out of a corner, yes, the rear end may be sliding out, but if you realize that fast enough, you can back out of the throttle, straighten it up, maybe only double into that rhythm section, maybe you get a bad drive out of that corner into the next straightaway, but you're not penalized by just completely yard sailing, trying to do something that, was basically a Hail Mary to begin with, because you had to get that perfect traction out of the corner by leaning over. Now, the biggest thing that this entire update really is going to affect is how tracks are built moving forward, because a lot of the track creators actually were not pushing back, but a little skeptical about this, because all of these old tracks, especially paid mods that are on the MX Bike shop, kind of became a moot point if they completely changed the dynamic of how to go into rhythm sections, how to go into straightaways on big tracks. And especially if the bikes are slightly slower because of this traction model, some of the bigger jumps that were already big hucks in the old patch will be almost impossible in this new one. And I was looking through a couple of creators and, seeing what they had to say. And one of the bigger ones of late, of course, is the Hills release by Pelster, and he actually took to Instagram to talk about how he feels that overall this is a good change, and for the Hills it makes pretty much only a couple jumps not really doable or not very viable anymore. So for his sake, he's probably going to still be playing with some of those Beta 18 or V.018 bikes that the OEM teams had so that he can play his Hills track. But, it's not going to change everything drastically. And for the most part, especially at the high-speed stuff, if you're going really fast down a straightaway, the high-speed level is still actually pretty similar. You're still going to be going just as fast once you get there. It's just the distance it's going to take you to get to that place in the first place, because if you don't have increased traction coming out of the corner like you used to, it might be harder to get up to what is quote-unquote full speed. So, again, I think that this does affect change moving forward with track builds, and why it's kind of the right move of, in a way, stepping back from that concrete traction model is we were starting to get to a level where the game looked and played sometimes almost unrealistic, because you're just going so fast through the corners, so fast into rhythm sections, doing unrealistic rhythm sections as well because of that traction model. And I think a lot of simulated fans of this game were getting skeptical of the fact that we didn't want it to fall down the realm of something like NMX vs ATV Legends, where it is just 5-6 through a rhythm section and you're out. They wanted it to be realistic, where basically the max you can do is triple into a rhythm section, and then from there, I think that it's gonna work itself out with acceleration models and stuff like that are going straight forward. But the tracks are being scaled and built to an unrealistic spec at that point, because if you got a 3-in, you were nailing the corner perfectly, and I think they'll be able to scale those 3-ins back a little bit so that you can still, triple in pretty comfortably with this new traction model. But it's almost going to be impossible to do anything bigger than that, because you just simply, if you start just absolutely hammering the throttle out of the corner, you're going to slide out. Plain and simple. That's the whole point of this model, is to make it so that you have to think about where you are in the range, what gear you're in, how much throttle you can give it in that gear so that you don't slip coming out of the corner, so on and so forth. All these things that, in real life, they deal with the same thing. More so, they're feathering the clutch sometimes, obviously, whereas you don't use the clutch that much in this game, and it's more about throttle control. But I urge any of you guys that have ever been to a Supercross, go there during practice one time, or, qualifying during the day, and stand near a corner where there's a triple out of a corner, and listen to the throttle range that those guys are in. It is not Jet Lawrence coming out of the top of a berm at this perfect lean angle, practically wide open, nailing a triple in. It's very much like a that kind of a sound, but obviously 4-stroke, where it's a low grumble to get the right traction, and then once you stand it up and go straight, that's where you give it the berries. And that's pretty much exactly, in my opinion, what Linz was talking about with the center of the wheel gaining the most traction and forward, momentum. That's what you're going to get. So there's a lot to detail in this beta 0.19 or V10.19 update from the OEM crew, but first off, just a massive congratulations to them for putting all this hard work into it, getting it through the finish line. You know, early supporters were a big help in helping them get there so that they could test it and bounce some ideas off of them as well. But in general, they still release this for free for us all to play and feel this game at a much different level than the base physics of the game, because this is all just a modded community working to make this game basically what it is today. So hats off to them. Massive congratulations for all the hard work that goes into this. And yeah, Beta 19 OEMs are here. Get them in the description below, like I said. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this detailed video. If there's any more questions or comments that I can answer, I'll try my best. I am not the MX Bikes guru, but I will work as hard as I possibly can to get you guys the right answers and point you in the right direction about what, how, and why these OEMs are here, what they mean, and how you can get them to work better for you. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.